Hi guys, Southern Scouser here. Been a little while, but we need to talk about Liverpool. So, yeah, I haven't really been on here since we won the league. Obviously, Arne Slot's first season. Magical. Obviously, Carabao Cup final was a shame. FA Cup out to Plymouth wasn't great. And a narrow on penalties defeat to PSG, who went on to win the Champions League. So, in terms of the league, absolutely fantastic until the last month of the season, where I felt it was a little bit unprofessional. Already won the league, but 4 games left to go, and kind of just gave up, really. Over in Ibiza before the end of the season, and finished the season with a bit of a whimper. I don't think we won any of our games after the title was confirmed. So hope, kind of thought, yeah, lots of form, but the season's kind of done. Not too much to worry about. Back-to-back titles, all that kind of thing. Something that's not been done in my lifetime. It's not since the 80s. I don't think they've done that. So yeah, you're looking and thinking, okay, can we retain the title? Can we go, a little bit further in the Champions League and maybe pick up a domestic cup? And obviously, we have quite an interesting summer. Lots of ins and outs, which is rare for a team that's won the league, to have that much upheaval, really. And not necessarily because it's an aging team that all kind of got to the end at the same time. So, to lose Luis Diaz to Bayern Munich, he was 28, 29, had good spells for us and then some dry spells for us, which worked quite nicely with interchanging and with Gakpo. But, ultimately he was still on a fairly, in football terms, fairly average wage at a top club. And for his age, it was a case of, well, we've just given Salah a bumper new deal. We've just given Van Dijk a bumper new deal. Can we go and do that to Luis Diaz as well and have 3 players going into their 30s on, £250,000 a week or more? In the case of Salah, obviously. So, kind of made sense. Good fee for someone of his age. Wages, obviously, you've got to keep within a certain bracket. But in my opinion, we didn't replace him. So I think that's one of the points I want to raise, that left wing we are short. Obviously, striker department. Obviously, God rest his soul, Diogo Jota. Horrible. There's no words that you can describe for something like that happening in football. It's tragic. It's horrendous, and I feel so horrible for him and his family. What they had to go through. It's horrendous. I couldn't believe it when it happened, and I was reading it. It just didn't sink in. But on the football side of things, I have to try and make this very separate. Diogo Jota, he's been a very good player for us, but at the same time, he was injured a lot. He missed a lot of games. He got injured a lot. He'd come back in, do well. I'm a massive Diogo Jota fan. When he had those kind of runs in the team where he would play maybe 5, 6, 7 games in a row, he'd probably score 5, 6 or 7 goals in that time, and then he'd pick up a niggle, he'd pick up a knock, or when he did get an injury, it was always a serious one. He'd always be out for months. So, yeah, him and Núñez as the main strikers last season didn't really work. We relied on Diaz and Salah quite heavily. Gravenberch had the season of his life. Szoboszlai, McAllister kept that going. A bit of Trent, bit of Robbo, and obviously Van Dijk, Alisson and Konate were super solid. So I don't think there was major work to be done, but definitely in the striker department I think we could have improved, and we did. We went out and got Ekitike, went out and got eventually Alexander Isak. So I thought that's 2 absolutely fantastic strikers, probably the 2 best strikers on the market. But I did feel we'd left ourselves slightly short in the wings, which has kind of proved now that Rio's had to come up and be that kind of, I don't know, fourth choice winger. Chiesa now kind of the 3rd choice winger, which he wasn't even involved really last year. So I think that proves the point that wings we are a little bit short. Other than that, obviously we replaced Trent because he left, which was a shame. But Frimpong, in my opinion, was the best right back on the market as well, which hasn't gone very well for him so far. But we'll get onto that in a little while. And then, yeah, I'll be honest, I think at left back, I think Tsimikas and Robertson. Tsimikas for me isn't at the level. Robertson for me was going over his best, past his best, sorry. And getting in someone like Kirkes, really good age, knows the league, looked really good. Again, I thought was a no-brainer. But and then obviously right at the end, we got Florian Wirtz as well. Kind of the one position we probably didn't need but haven't had in a while. I can't think of anybody like that since Coutinho, like a number 10 creator that we've had. So no, that was really exciting. The fact that we can now, you know, in my Liverpool time following Liverpool, we've never really signed players I'd heard of in terms of the top tier of each position. It'd be a case of, you know, let's sign someone that, you know, like Mo Salah. Let's sign Mo Salah. You know, he's tried Chelsea, he's not really worked. He's gone to Roma. Let's give him another chance. And fantastic. But to go out and sign, you know, best in class strikers, best in class number 10, best in class right back, best option at left back, left me really excited for what's to come this season. And obviously we go into the Community Shield, Crystal Palace, you know, again. And don't look great. Ekitike scores a good goal, but we lose ultimately on penalties. Not the end of the world, but early warning signs. I was like, should really be winning that one. Started the season pretty well, results wise. Obviously performance wise, I think we rode our luck a little bit. You know, that first game against Bournemouth, 2-up, end up throwing it away and winning it late. You know, there's a lot of games that were late wins. You know, Arsenal, there was like 4 or 5 games in a row. Newcastle, where we were winning, you know, we scored like 85th minute or after we scored the winning goal. So as much as that's great, is that sustainable throughout the season? Not really. You know, I think winning in the last minute is different to winning 1-0. If you're winning 3-2 in the last minute because you've had to chuck excuse me, about 6 strikers on, you know, you're chasing the game, something's gone wrong over the line. Whereas for like an Arsenal, you know, you score 1-0 in the first half or the 60th minute, and you kind of grind out a 1-0 defeat and shut up shop at the back. You know, they're letting three goals in the season. We've let in 3 goals in multiple matches. I think there's a difference. So yeah, what has gone wrong really is kind of, you know, there's 7 minutes catch up of the last sort of 12 months or so. What's happened? Why have we now lost 6 of our last 7 games? And there's a few things really. I think player form is natural. It's going to go up, it's going to go down, and the ones we've lost, you know, up to a point, if you don't count the Crystal Palace result last night, have been by the odd goal. So, you know, I think a lot of people are getting a bit flappy and a little bit like, oh, sack the manager and stuff. It's like, and that used to be me when I was, you know, a teenager, but now I'm older, wiser and less hair. I see the longer game picture, and, you know, this guy's just won the league. Yeah, all this, oh, it's Klopp's team. No, of course it's Klopp's team. He didn't buy anybody, but Klopp was finishing 3rd with this team. Slot's finished 1st with it. So, you know, it's not like he took over a team that had just won the league or won anything for a while. You know, we hadn't won anything for a little while, really. I don't think we'd won. You know, I think the last trophy we'd won was the Champions League and then the Prem in 2020. So, you know, up to last season, we've gone 4 years without really anything. So, I don't buy into this. It's Klopp's team. Slot did a fantastic job, got the best out of everybody. You know, kind of reinvigorated Gravenberch into one of the best CDMs in the world, and that's kind of where I'm going to start. You know, he's been missing this season. He's been injured. You know, look what the difference Man City look when they lose Rodri. You know, it's such a key position, and I think that's been one of the major problems. I think Szoboszlai's been phenomenal this season. McAllister has really struggled. You know, injuries and form, so that's not helped. And then, rather than playing a 4-3-3 with a DM, we've kind of gone into playing a 4-3-3 with a cam in Wirtz. And, you know, Salah's form has been poor. Gakpo's been good, but then we're so heavily reliant on him now. He's the only left winger, really. Isak's not got going yet, and Ekitike's been okay. So I just think, like, you know, the word unbalanced has been chucked out there, and there's no excuses. You can't spend £400 million on a team that's just won the league and chuck up that team last night in the Carabao Cup for me. I think that's wrong. But yeah, you know, a lot of change all at once. You know, some forced into, you know, fullbacks and things like that. But yeah, I think the main bit for me is that midfield. Midfield is where you win. the game. I think if you win the midfield battle 9 times out of 10, you win the match, and I think that's where we've kind of lost our rhythm, if you like. So, you know, did we the Endo thing? We've got Endo. He's a backup CDM to Gravenberch. We've not had Gravenberch for the last 2 or 3 games, 4 games, whatever, how long it's been. How many has he started of them in that position? 0. So why is he here? Completely pointless. You know, Endo comes on if we're winning a game, which is very rare lately. If we're winning a game with 10 minutes left, chuck Endo one, see it out. So, did we need? You know, yes, of course you want to go out and buy Florian Wirtz. Of course you do. But what was so successful that last year was a 4-3-3 with a DM. Should we have probably stuck to that shape, that formation and that style, you know, and brought in a backup CDM, so if Gravenberch does get injured, you know, we're not relying on changing the entire shape, which, like you say, hasn't really worked. So yeah, that's kind of, you know, the gist of it. In terms of performances and results, you know, you can lose 3-2, you can lose 2-1. You know, we've lost to Man United in the past, or drawn, not at home, but we've had bad results, you know, drop points against United when we've really been the better team, and then the next time we played them we've won 5-0. So I think everybody needs to kind of chill. Yes, it's a bad run of form. We had exactly the same when we won the league last time. If you remember, Klopp won the league the following season. We were absolutely dreadful. I think we went 4 or 5 games at home. We lost every game. You know, Burnley, Chelsea, Fulham. I remember I was like, are we going to turn it today? No, we've lost again. So, you know, give him time. You know, there's, you know, the Jota thing obviously is another reason why, you know, you have to think and chuck that into the mix. You know, it didn't stop them winning the first 5-6 games of the season, but, you know, grief is a difficult thing. So I think you have to take that into context. But, you know, looking forwards, we've got, you know, I think why I needed to make this video was last night, you know, the Carabao Cup. Last year we got to the final. Last year in the FA Cup, he kind of put out a similar team. You know, no one on the bench really, and we went out. So, you know, if we were playing Swansea or Championship opposition last night, I kind of would have got it a little bit more. And of course, the Carabao Cup is the least important trophy, but chucking out that kind of team against Crystal Palace, who have already had our number, at home. You know, I was at Cobham Services yesterday, and I see a lot of Liverpool fans going up, and if they're stopping at Cobham as a stop, you know, think how far further down south they've started. So I think that's poor. You know, you're selling tickets for a cup game, and you've basically chucked out a team which is, you know, probably worse than a pre-season friendly team, really. I was really disappointed. I didn't even bother watching the game. I was like, well, the slot doesn't care, neither do I. And that is very, very, very rare for me. You know, I will watch every game. I'll watch games. You know, I'll try and find a stream, even if it's not on telly. But you know, to check out that team, and then to double down on that, and the bench that he picked, you know, was poor. I think if we were away to Plymouth like we were before, it's a long old drive. I kind of get it a little bit. You know, let's give Van Dijk, does he need to travel 6 hours or whatever it is? Not really, you know. But it's at home. We're at home to Premier League opposition. If we win, we're in the quarterfinals. You know, you could quite easily have played Van Dijk for half, Konate for the other half. You could have quite easily had an Ekitike and a Salah and a Szoboszlai on the bench. You know, they all live around Liverpool, you know? So I thought that was poor. And I just saw the goals coming in, you know, 1-0, 2-0, 3-0. Ismail Assar, I mean, why don't we sign him, for God's sake? We like signing everyone else that scores against us. So yeah, I think I was a bit disappointed with that. Go out with a whimper and basically put out a team where you're like, no, you know, you pretty much know that you aren't going to win this game. You've chucked it in the bin. So looking forward, as I say, that now puts massive pressure on Slot and Liverpool, because he's basically said, look, I'm going to sacrifice this cup. We're in really bad form. It's all on the Prem, it's all on the Champions League. And, you know, we looked at the Champions League last year and thought, well, we won the group and got, you know, the table, whatever you call it, and we got absolutely nothing for it. So, you know, when we did lose to Galatasaray, I was like, you know, it's all right. It's not the end of the world. If you win out of 8 out of 8, you don't get anything easier than the team that finishes 16th, really, other than one less tie. But that's a whole nother story. So yeah, there's a few reasons. You know, the right back thing I wanted to come on to. You know, Frimpong's come in to, in my opinion, just, you know, be Trent, not in the way that he plays it. You know, Beckham style, quarterback style. you know, free kicks and crossfield balls. Frimpong will get you the same amount of goals and assists as Trent, but he's up and down. He's a wing back, a flying wing back. You look at some of the Leverkusen games, getting around the back, cutting it back, volleys, back post. So, you know, we've not seen that yet. Frimpong to come back is huge. I think the whole Bradley thing, he's a good backup right back, but he's not good enough to start for Liverpool. He's not. Sorry. You know, I like him, I like his style, I like his attitude, but if he was playing for Middlesbrough in the Championship, I'd be like, yeah, fair enough. You know, if he was back up, you know, if he was Burnley right back, yeah, okay. There's nothing X factor about Bradley. There isn't. And if you're going to be starting every week for Liverpool, you have to be special, and he isn't. So, you know, Frimpong to come back. When we get Isak in Newcastle flying form, that's going to be huge. You know, trying to get Gravenberch and Wirtz into the team is an interesting conundrum, because we have to quickly get Gravenberch back in this team, and that's why the back four has looked so exposed, because they haven't had anybody sitting in front of them. So we need to get Gravenberch back in there in front of Van Dijk and Konate. You know, I think we need Frimpong to start being a regular right back. You know, Kerkez hasn't had the greatest of starts, but it's a difficult one. Robertson's almost too old, and Kerkez is almost too young. So using them both in the right situations at the right moments, I think, is going to be key. Midfield, let Szoboszlai keep doing his thing, because he's been excellent. Curtis Jones dipping in has been great. Getting McAllister back to some kind of form will be huge. You know, Ekitike Karen doing what he's doing. Salah needs to obviously rediscover his form, and relying on Gakpo on the left wing all on his own, I think, is a big ask. So looking at the next few weeks, we are going to turn it around. We're not going to go and lose, you know, 9 of 10 or something like that. You know, I back us to beat Villa at the weekend. Madrid in midweek. You know, if we lose, it's Real Madrid. It's not the end of the world in an 8-game league phase of a Champions League. As long as we come in the top 16, I don't really care. And then Man City next weekend is a big one. It is a big one, because it's almost a title eliminator, isn't it? You know, if Arsenal keep winning, you know, Man City or Liverpool are going to be the closest challengers, aren't they? So the loser of that game is suddenly quickly becoming the third choice of chaser. So that's a big game. You know, a draw's not the end of the world. You know, we're 7 points behind Arsenal. We've only played about 9 games. You know, you hear the media like the bloody game's done, like the league's done. You know, oh my God, Arsenal have already won the league. Well, you know, they were saying that about us before, and then we lost a couple of games, and I know it's Arsenal now. Well, if Arsenal lose 2 of the next 5, and Liverpool, you know what I mean, catch up a little bit, you know, we could be talking about 2-3 points in it in November or December. Ages to go yet. I mean, God, to put all your money on the perennial bottlers, Arsenal, to carry on like this for the rest of the season. You know, they're not blowing teams away. I've said it's better to win 1-0 and keep a clean sheet than it is to get a last minute winner, but they're only winning 1-0. They're only scoring a set piece chance most weeks, and if that suddenly doesn't happen, it quickly becomes 0-0s a lot. You know, they're very good at defending, but they're not free flowing. Their strikers aren't really getting going either yet. So, you know, very, very premature to be saying, oh, it's Arsenal's title to lose. Not for me. It's very, very open. We do need to turn this form around. We do need to get back to it quickly. We do need to start getting some points on the board, and we will. And all of the reasons I've mentioned, it's just unfortunate they've all come at the same time. So, you know, once we start getting your Frimpongs, your Isaks, your Salahs, your Gravenberchs back in a team, back on form, it will make a huge difference, and we will start to win games. You know, no Carabao Cup distraction now. You know, yeah, I don't mind, you know, not winning the Carabao Cup, but what annoyed me was, you know, the team. They didn't deserve a night off, you know, and it was at home. So, you know, you can lose in the cup, but to go out 3-0 with a team of youngsters is not good enough. You know, saying about lack of depth when you've spent that much money because you've put all your eggs in 3 baskets, pretty much, you know, in terms of the costs of Wirtz, Ekitike and Isak, but it'll get there. You know, relax. People calling for Slot's head, you're absolutely mental. Absolutely mental. You know, let's see where we are at the end of the season. He deserves minimum that. And if we get to the end of the season and he's finished, say the worst case, you know, we got knocked out, we didn't make it out of the groups of the Champions League, or we got knocked out in the last 16, you know, we didn't get anywhere in the FA Cup, and we finished, I don't know, 6th in the league, 5th in the league, we've missed out on, sixth in the league, because then you miss out on Champions League. Then you can go, okay, that's poor, But even then, I think you give him a summer to try and turn it around again. Klopp got that. Klopp finished outside the Champions League places before. We didn't sack him. It was rubbish. We had a terrible season, and we didn't get in it. We had the year where we had all the injuries. We managed to scrape in at the end with Williams and Phillips at the back, and then a couple of years later we missed out entirely, just from bad form. So relax. It's nearly November. We're 7 points behind. It's not 27. It's not 17. We will get there. Players will come back. Form will come back. There's been a little bit of experimenting with form and shape, and it's looked a little bit, or let's just chuck everybody on at the end. So I would like to see, if you're going to rely on Chiesa as a third choice winger, then play him. Don't keep sticking with the same players and then just chuck Chiesa in with a load of kids on his own. Chiesa deserves a start. He deserves to start over on the left or the right wing, over a Gakpo or a Salah sometimes. And then Rio can be that sub coming on, the fourth choice winger. So yeah, I think last thing for me is just relax. It's going to be okay. I get the knee-jerk reactions, but we seem to have gone from last year we wouldn't have expected to win the league to now we're almost expecting to win it again. So I think just chill. If we can come in the top three, is that the end of the world? No. Obviously I want to win the league. It's not over yet. All of these things are going to come back. Look at January, for example, the January transfer window. Let's have a little look where we are by then. But I think centre-back, the Gahey thing, it's not the reason we are where we are, because Konate and Van Dijk played pretty much the whole season last year. But it would help having another centre-back in there, because at the moment, the Oni's been injured early on. Gomez isn't that level anymore, and Robertson isn't a centre-back, and neither is Endo. So yeah, to have a Liverpool squad with two senior centre-backs really, is quite poor. So we need a centre-back in. I think we need a winger, someone that can maybe play left or right. But yeah, I think definitely someone that can play on the left. Strikers were fine. We got rid of Harvey Elliott. Could we do with another midfielder in there to give it a little bit more freshness? You got the likes of Gravenberch out, McAllister not fit. You kind of got Jones as a Bosley, and then Wirtz trying to kind of find a position. Maybe we could do with one more in there as well. But yeah, obviously the goalie thing. Missing Addison. I didn't mention that. That's huge. Remember Dashvili's brand new. You forget about that. Yeah, we signed him 2 years ago, but he was on loan for a season. This is his first season with Liverpool, first season in the Premier League. He was at Valencia. They're a bang average Spanish team now. I think they were fighting closer to fighting relegation than they were, European places. So he's coming from a place where he's used to having the ball getting picked out of his net quite a lot. So that's different for him. He's left-footed. We've got to kind of get used to playing him back the ball on that side, and get used to playing with his style. So again, all of these things that are adding up have all come at once and upset a team that was in good harmony, winning the league, winning every week, to now, through the team, there's maybe 6 or 7 players in there that weren't here last year that are starting weekly. It's huge. It's a huge change. So yeah, relax. We might be able to bring in a centre-back and a winger in January, which I think we need. But yeah, keep calm, carry on. It's going to be okay. Big week coming up for Slot. I think if he loses the next 3, then there will be some serious questions. But I think we'll be okay. I think if we can beat Villa at the weekend, that will relieve some pressure. Madrid, as I said, I don't. Avoiding defeat would be good. A draw would be fine. And then that Man City game, for me, if we win that, we're back in it. If we lose it, yeah, it's a long way back for the title, and maybe we have to adjust our expectations of maybe a top 3 from there, which again, yes, it's not ideal, but it's not the end of the world. Maybe we can pick up some form after Christmas and go on a Champions League hunt, because look, we won the Champions League in 2005 with one of the worst squads we've ever had. So all good. Yeah, enjoyed doing that. Hopefully I'll do a few more, but yeah, life gets in your way, doesn't it? Thanks for listening. Take care. See you soon.